My friend called me to a party, and that's how I met the love of my life. And I met Chester, and from the day we met, we were never apart. We were both very emotionally unhealthy in our own different ways. And over our time together, we were together for 12 and a half years, we both grew. He struggled with addiction and depression, two things that I have never struggled with. Although I do have my own demons, I did have my hardships growing up, we just handled them in very different ways. So I came from a point of complete, for lack of a better term, ignorance to a situation. But over time, I came to learn that taking care of your mental health is, as I said before, as important as taking care as your physical health. When Chester died, it was a complete surprise. My husband had in the past, he had attempted suicide. But, I thought to myself, it was because he was wasted. He was, this or that. And, so when he did pass, I thought, very naively, I thought we were in the clear. We had a very dear friend, Chris Cornell, take his own life. And I felt that, okay, Chester sees, what Vicky and the kids, were godparents to their children, what they're going through, and this will never happen. So we went on a family trip to our cabin. That's the video that Jim showed you. My husband was full of life. He had to go back home early to work. He was very excited to be promoting the new album and doing stuff. So he was happy. Gave me a kiss goodbye, gave the kids a kiss goodbye, and I never saw him again. The phone call I received that next morning was life-altering. My children's lives were altered forever. And in the travel time, which felt like 1,000 years to get from Sedona back home, I knew that I had to walk into the home where my husband took his life, and I had to normalize that for my children, because they were going to respond to how I reacted. I walked into that house, and I walked up to the room that it happened in. I made my peace with it, and then I made it as normal as I can. And that was the beginning of my journey of doing what I can do to normalize mental health, to normalize it's not always okay. My children have been my driving force, because one day my grandchildren are gonna look back, and they're gonna know their grandfather's life, which, by the way, I don't have grandchildren yet. I'm very hopeful. With as many kids as we have, though, it's bound to happen. But I was thinking, when they look back and they think about their grandfather, his life speaks for itself. I think we can all agree on that. His life has touched us in so many ways, many different ways. His voice is the sound of a generation, and he is a legend, and that will never die. And I thought, his death needs to do the same. He can't be another rock star gone bad. Tragic. That can't be why. His death has to be the tipping point, has to show people we could seem so normal, so okay, and then not be okay in an instant. I will share with you, the night my husband took his life, or the early morning, he had been sober for almost 6 months, which was amazing for him. He had a lot of shame in the past when he had relapsed. Shame that he had just begun to share with me in the couple months before he died. Shame I didn't even know a person could have. So when he passed, and I learned that there were 2 empty beer bottles in the room, I knew he had relapsed, but I also knew he wasn't so intoxicated, out of his mind, like I would have thought. I knew instantly that drink triggered that shame, triggered a lifetime of unhealthy neural pathways. And this is what I want to get through to as many as I can. It is so important that we take care of our mental health. If you have children, speak to them about taking care of your emotions. Put words to their feelings. They go to school, they go to PE, they learn their cardiovascular health, they dissect animals when they're older. But for the most part, they don't know words for how they're feeling. Bullying, especially with social media nowadays, the need to teach our children how to cope is so important. And my husband didn't have that. He suffered from depression as a child, and it was untreated. He had traumas throughout his childhood, which many of us have. I have myself. But the way his pathways kept going, they just kept going towards disaster. And by the time he died, it was so much work. I believe, as Mike said, it was so much work for him to just do normal stuff, to be happy. I wish I would have realized this sooner. I'm not saying I could have saved him. Only he could have done that. And I will share with you, our 11-year-old son, Tyler, he suffers from depression. It was diagnosed through an ADD evaluation with a therapist a couple of years ago. He had markers, and we talked about it in our family. He's never experienced shame with it. And to this day, this week, he has Yellow Ribbon Week, which is a National Suicide Prevention Week. And my son is in 6th grade making a speech to his school about that, about being a kid that's diagnosed with clinical depression, but not having shame for it. And that's something I would like to pass to you, is there is no shame in not being okay. And I think about how hard Chester worked. And after every album, he had the pressure to do better than he did before. I can't even begin to imagine carrying that burden, that stress. But all of you as professionals or parents or friends, I believe it's safe to assume you typically do your best at what you do. And when things get hard, you work at it. You work to do better. But there's this thing that when it comes to ourselves, when things get hard emotionally, we tend to want to think of it as a weakness. And I'm here to tell you, it's not a weakness. It's actually one of your biggest strengths. You just have to take power over that. Not be ashamed, to remove the shame, to be able to look at somebody and be like, I'm not okay today. How many of us have asked somebody, hey, how are you? In passing. Are we really asking, how are you? I think I personally would love to see more people just stop and listen. How are you? Things aren't going so well today. Can I give you a hug? Or I'm sorry that's happening to you. Just that acknowledgement, rather than that having to be always like, it's okay. I can remember Chester learning that this was a specific moment in time. We were on tour. We had just gotten on the plane, and we always rode together. It was Mike and Dave and Chester, and my sweet husband. He was always complaining about his back, his neck, his whatever. This is very Chester. But yeah. So he was extra sensitive, and he had asked. Dave had asked, how are you, or something, or how you been, or something like that. So Chester goes on to one of his quite long conversations. Those of us that knew him knows he just loved to talk. But at some point, Dave, naturally kind of zoned out. And I remember speaking to him afterwards, and his feelings were really hurt. He didn't really want to know how I was. And that, to me, was very insightful, because that was Chester's perception of that question. My perception was very different. I thought Dave actually was listening to him, and Chester went on and on. But it made me aware and really start to realize how often you're asked, "How are you?" And then somebody turns away, and they're really not listening. As Chester's wife, of course, there are, I can only imagine the things that have gone through my head. What did I miss? What could I have done? As much as social media has been a huge support for me, I do every now and then get people blaming me, straight up blaming me for him dying, for not saving him, for mistreating him, or who knows why these people behind their devices are saying these horribly cruel things to me. But it is a little stab in the heart. But what I have to remember is that it's not my fault. It's not my children's fault. It's not the band's fault. It's nobody's fault.
Not Chester's fault.
Not Chester's fault.
Yeah,
No, it's not a fault. It's years of untreated mental health, which led to substance abuse, which led to unhealthy relationships, which, by the time I met him, he was ready to be healthier. You can, to that, understand that. And so my message I want to say to you is, you have to be responsible for your own health. It's okay. Please reach out to those you love. But at the end of the day, it's up to you to be who you want to be. And I'm still learning that. I'm still going through that. Of course, I have my moments, of, what could I have done differently? Our sweet son blames himself. He says, "Mom, we shouldn't have gone on our trip. Dad would still be here." And that breaks my heart. And that's his journey, to understand that it's not his fault either. And so I don't know if any of you can relate, or if any of you have lost a loved one to suicide, or know of anybody that's self-harmed. But you can do so much, but you can only do so much. And the best thing to do is to be an example of taking care of yourself, because others do look to you. They do look to you for love and support. Shortly before Chester passed, he received this dog tag from a veteran. And on it says, "Without courage, wisdom bears no fruit." And that, I found this after he passed, at a time when I needed to hear it the most. So I just wanted to pass that to you. Now you know, we've shared wisdom with you, but it takes courage. It takes courage. And I wish the courage for each and every one of you to take care of yourself.
Thank you, Talinda.